The views and opinions expressed here on Wrestling Winedown are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. What's up, guys? It's Lo, and you are tuned in to Wrestling Winedown, a female-founded and hosted podcast dedicated to professional wrestling and our favorite adult beverage. I, for one, absolutely love to see women killing it in sports, especially when it comes to combat sports and professional wrestling. On this episode, I am joined by Stella Kae, who formerly served as a makeup artist in WWE, as well as on the management side of AEW. While Stella has stepped away from the world of working in professional wrestling, her love of combat sports still remain. Stella is the founder of Sports Bimbo, a weekly combat-focused sports podcast providing lighthearted weekly commentary on the latest UFC and boxing news. Stella is telling us all about how she was able to get into both WWE and AEW, some of the friendships that she's been able to cultivate in these companies, and how being involved in the company made her a fan. Stella is telling us all about her new brand, Sports Bimbo, as well as why it is so important to her to have a hyper-feminine brand in a male-dominated field such as combat sports. So grab your favorite glass of bubbly. We're going in for the 3 count. We are back with another episode of Wrestling Winedown. I am joined by a lady who is also in the sports entertainment world. She's covering MMA, she's covering boxing, combat sports. Stella Kae, welcome to Wrestling Winedown. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. Thank you for asking me to join you.
Yes, I've followed your journey for a while now, and it's just been so amazing to see your growth and your progression within the community. So I'm so excited to just jump right in and see exactly what you're all about.
Thank you, and same. I love what you guys are doing. You guys have grown so much. I have a bunch of the shirts. You guys are killing it.
Thank you. When did you first become a professional wrestling fan?
So, unlike most people, I did not grow up watching wrestling. Like, if you're like Latino or Black, like you were aware of certain things, you know, I feel like it was like a big part of the culture. Like I knew Rey Mysterio and like Eddie Guerrero, like I had seen China and I thought like, wow, that's cool. But I definitely didn't watch. I can't claim to have ever been into it. I ended up getting a job at WWE by chance, total accident circumstance, and it was through working backstage. And not everyone that works backstage becomes fans, you know, but I would stick around and watch matches. I was just like enthralled. I was like, wow, cool. Initially I got a job as a makeup artist and I had wanted to quit for a while. Honestly, I was over the makeup thing. I had gotten into it really young and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. But wrestling kept me in makeup as long as I was in it. I would have left probably a long time ago, but I just wanted to be around the wrestling so bad. And I think the wrestler that really kind of got a hook on me actually was Naomi Trinity. To me, it was just so cool to see these like beautiful women who were so hot, but like doing athletic things with their body. And her level of athleticism was just noticeably very different to me. I didn't know anything about wrestling, but just seeing the stuff she could do, I would stick around and watch her matches. And before I knew it, I was watching Jon Moxley and like everybody else that was around. And then through osmosis over the past, it's been 10 years. I just kind of learned everything and know everyone now. So now I'm an expert, but I came into it in 2014, not really knowing anything except for Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, you know?
So how long did you work for WWE and how did that experience treat you?
I started WWE in 2014. And first I worked exclusively with Stephanie McMahon, like traveling around with her. And then one day she said to me, would you ever come to TV? And I didn't know what that meant. I thought like for a visit, for a one-off. And I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to. That sounds cool. And then the next day I had a call from a producer with my travel schedule for the like next 3 months. And I was just on the road. And then I ended up in 2019, maybe before that, getting the offer, but it didn't come to fruition until maybe 2019 when Cody and the Bucks, you know, and the Elite started AEW. I was friends with Cody from WWE, and he had always made a promise to me, which he kept his word on. He said, I'm going to get another TV show one day. He really wanted to do something else. And he said, I'm going to bring you with me. And I was like, yeah, okay, Cody, whatever, you know. And then he did it. He had another TV show and it was a huge thing. And so he was the one who brought me along in 2019 to AEW, and he knew I wanted to kind of pivot out of the makeup space. So he gave me a role in management, which was really cool. And he kind of let me help in some other things. I did a lot of the on-camera crowd during the pandemic, which was really fun. And and then eventually I left to do combat sports. So it's kind of been from 2014 till now that I've been involved in some way or another.
What have been some of your favorite experiences through these two companies that you worked for?
Definitely the friendships. They mean everything to me. That's what's kept me around. My entire social life and circle to this day is all wrestlers. They're just the people I love. They're so cool. They're so talented, but they're very real people. When I started off doing makeup before I was at WWE, I was in entertainment. So, very mainstream celebrities, and they didn't have quite the same humbleness. It was a lot of big egos and stuff. But when I came to wrestling, it was these people with even way bigger platforms than anyone I had ever worked with, millions of reach, but they just, they're down to sit on the floor at the arena and talk to anyone. And I liked that realness. So it's the friendships all the way. That's more important to me than the jobs. They're my family now.
Most people will never get the opportunity to work for a major wrestling company, let alone two. What's one thing you learned about the wrestling business from being in it for so many years?
Yeah, that is very lucky. But I think once you have your foot in one and you're part of that community, you can, a lot of people at AEW did come from WWE, TNA, New Japan. So I think once you have your foot in the door. But I think from the outside looking in, it does seem like a tough industry to crack into behind the scenes, unless you know someone. It's it's not like a regular place where you can just go into the building and hand your resume. It's very insider. It's very protected community. So I think that is something I learned. I would have never guessed how to even get in these doors that I got into, and I'm sure that is upsetting for some people that that's their dream. Though I think maybe now it's a little more open. I know AEW has their careers page that they're always updating, and WWE as well. But especially back then, I think I would have had no idea where to even get this job. It was just, I literally met Stephanie at the Super Bowl. It was really a who kind of thing. I happened to be at the Super Bowl with a client, and I met Stephanie, and I got these opportunities just totally by chance. I'm very lucky and very grateful. She changed my life.
After leaving professional wrestling, you moved into covering combat sports for a media company, which you've candidly discussed on social media. Do you see similarities between the world of UFC, MMA, combat sports, and professional wrestling in terms of fan base and acceptance of new individuals who might be looking into watching it, or even female fans?
I think there's a lot of crossover in the demographic. I actually got so deeply into MMA, UFC through people I had met from wrestling world. So meeting some of the fighters backstage, watching their fights and being this is really cool. Also, honestly, like I told you, the sports aspect is what kept me around. Not so much the makeup, which I don't know if people knew about, and then how I had been trying to transition for quite a while. I would have loved to do more in wrestling in terms of content. I'm just too insider. It's not possible. I'd be a dirt sheet. I'm not going to do that.
Right.
So there's not as much of a fun fan aspect because I am so tied into the community. There's no I wonder who's going to win. I know,
Right.
Whereas with combat, anything can happen. You don't know who's going to win it. So for me, that is an easier content for me to make. So that's why I started covering combat instead of trying to do more, because I wanted to come out from behind the scenes. I wanted to be a content creator. I wanted to be on camera and do things like that. But I didn't see how it would work out with wrestling being so insider and not being an athlete myself. And I don't want to be spouting off my own opinions. I don't want to be controversial. I don't want to be in people's business. So I'm let me just do, fights are fun because you can predict them. You could be right. You could be wrong. You're not really have to be in people's personal lives. So that was how I started covering combat. The difference in the fan base, it depends on the year. Right now, wrestling has evolved a lot. And that is a much more welcoming fan base, believe it or not, for women. There are times where I take breaks from combat and the MMA community and try to integrate myself more on social media with wrestling, just because it's relaxing. I know these people, and they're not gonna say anything too crazy. Whereas MMA is still very much hyper misogynistic, toxic masculinity. I get threats. So MMA is very unwelcoming to women. And that's part of why I know that my content in the combat space is going to do so well, just in terms of algorithm. Anything I post, I'm going to get so many comments. 90% of them are going to be so diabolically evil, but it's going to make my content perform well. So wrestling is more woke now, actually. The fan base will cancel each other if they're saying these like horrible things about your body or women or whatever, and people will rally behind you. So I think that space is a lot more relaxing in the community that I'm trying to infiltrate now. However, when I first got into it, 2014, 2015, so I was a regular person who got a cool job. I wasn't a content creator. I wasn't an influencer. I wasn't trying to be famous. I just got a cool job and I was really excited about it, making new friends. I was basically a local. You know what I mean? Like when someone has a local Twitter, you know? I was a local and sharing my life. And because of the people that I was around and involved with sharing about, all of a sudden I got like 10,000 followers. And people were so mean to me and so like crossing the boundaries, and people weren't as woke then. So I did get a lot of back then fat shaming, body shaming, like transphobia, which I'm not even, I'm not transgender, but they would just say, you look like a man, you look like you're transgender, whatever, I got death threats there just for being around the wrestlers. I don't know why. I think something about me just being a regular person and being around the people they admired really set them off. So it was very evil. I actually had a lot of trauma. Like I had to go to therapy about it. I had to learn how to navigate the fan base, what to give energy to and what not to. Because at first I would clap back at people who didn't deserve my attention, whatever, but I did have a lot of people in those early days violating what would be any sane boundaries, like finding my phone number and calling it, contacting family members, texting me. I've had someone show up at my house. People sent me mail. Like I was really just a normal everyday person. So that was very traumatic for me. And there was years where I tried to actually remove myself from the community in terms of publicly online. Like I would have a lot more followers than I have now if I leaned into it. But I would stop posting my friends who are wrestlers. I would try not to talk about it. And people would ask me, any tweet I made, I could be like, it's a beautiful day outside. And they would somehow turn it into a wrestling take, they'd be like, well, you, Roman Reigns is going to win or whatever. And so I was started to actively be like, I don't watch wrestling. I don't like wrestling. Leave me alone, just because I wanted these people to leave me alone.
Right.
And I successfully kind of did pull back from it for like a couple of years, but I just still have that like drive that it's still a big part of my life. And I just had to learn. Now I am a content creator and I am an influencer and I am trying to build my following. So now I'm kind of learning how to navigate it and lean into it. But it was very terrifying. Yeah, equally as terrifying in different ways. But now 2024 wrestling has evolved so much. So I don't feel that way about the community now. And it surprises me now because sometimes I expect it just from that old trauma of like all the stuff I went through. And everybody's like, especially AEW. I don't know if there was a difference between being involved with WWE and AEW, but the fan base was so much nice. Like the AEW fan base has always been kind to me. This whole time, 2019 till now, I don't have any of that like old traumatic situations. It just still has like an imprint on me that I'm scared. I'm still scared to like wake up to that kind of stuff sometimes if I have like a tweet that's popping up. I do a lot of tweet and deletes just because if something starts getting a lot of energy, it overwhelms me or whatever. But right now I'm proud of the community. There's a lot of good people, a lot of good fans. And I mean, obviously there's bad in anything and that.
Right.
People probably focus on that. But for me to see the evolution from 2014 till now, and then have to have something current to compare it to, it's to me, it's wholesome and relaxing.
Right. I mean, you've seen it 10 years now.
Yeah.
That's insane. How did the experience of working at a media outlet treat you? And what did it teach you not only about covering sports, but being a woman in a male dominated field such as UFC and MMA?
Yeah. So like I was saying, I wanted to pivot to sports, but I had that, pure wrestling background. So I had to try to leverage that into a position. So I got a job at a startup leveraging the experience just in the industry. So I kind of had to take like a pay cut, and like a deal with a lot of different things in order to make that pivot out from behind the scenes.
Right.
And it was a big deal for me because I was the only woman in the entire company. I guess there's not a lot of women interested in these roles. So I got a job as a combat sports content director for a startup. And I think they thought it was enough that they had hired one woman. They had filled their quota, And I don't think that they ever intentionally meant to be misogynistic. I just think it's so ingrained that people don't realize subconsciously the ways that they do it. So even though I was the boss technically of this department, combat, I was undermined and underestimated constantly. Like I would have an idea, like I'm just gonna make it up. I can't remember what it would be, but like, let's cover UFC 300, you know, and everyone would be like, I don't know, it's not a good idea. And then an intern who is a man would come in and be like, guys, we got to cover UFC 300. And they'd be like, hell yeah. It would, you know what I mean? And I would just notice a lot of that and be like, am I tripping? Am I gaslighting myself? But over the course of the year, it really was a thing. It was constantly. And I was like, this is not cool. And they would say that they wanted to do, they wanted more of a female audience to attract that demographic, but they would not, I'm the woman, and I would say, well, here's the type of fight content I'd like to see, and it would be completely disregarded. And then we'd have meetings and they'd say stuff like, can we do like a tutorial where you're like adding rhinestones to a UFC shirt? And I'm like, no, like let's make some fight forward content that's for women. Let's profile women fighters, or let's just have a woman do a fight prediction. Like, let's start with that kind of stuff, and then that kind of stuff can be secondary. But like, why, you know, I don't like that, even though like the aesthetic and of mine and also your brand is very like pink and stuff, but that's like secondary. That's just the aesthetic. That's just
right.
You know, but they were trying to make that like the complete content. Like, it's just, let's just bedazzle something in there and say here. And that's not a real fandom. And women, I think, are really underestimated, not just behind the scenes in the work environment, but also as fans. So yeah, I quit that job. I chose to quit eventually. I started doing Playboy actually while I was working there. Like I mentioned, I had like taken a pay cut to be there. So I was working like 50 hours a week and making pennies to just have that on my resume. So I started doing Playboy on the side, and that opened me up to a lot even more misogynist behavior at work. It became a less welcoming environment. So once I started making more with Playboy, I was like, you know what? I'm going to leave and I'm going to start my own brand, which is Sports Bimbo, which it took me a year after leaving to really kind of get together. But I'm doing that now, and I'm really excited to be able to present something to the world where you can do Playboy and like sports, and it can really be about the fights and not the bedazzling, you know?
Yeah, let's dive into Sports Bimbo. So tell me about the company. You said it took you about a year to kind of figure everything out. How did you come up with the name, and what are some of your goals going forward with the brand?
The name came from a lot of the comments that I was getting. So I would do some on-camera stuff for that company. And anytime I did, it would, like on TikTok, whatever, it would get like 1 million views. But the comments would all just be ferocious. It would say like, who is this broad? She's just thirst trapping. Like, what man told her to say this? Like, you know, I got a lot of like, bimbo, you don't know anything, go make me a sandwich, which I get till this day. I was actually late today because I was fighting with men on the internet about making sandwiches, but it was kind of like wanting to take the power back from that, because I'm like, how do I navigate this? Because they're just going to be so mean no matter what I do. And there was a time where I tried to shy away from combat too, where I was like, maybe I don't want to do this. Maybe I'll just do Playboy. Maybe I'll just take ass pictures for the rest of my life and hide, because this is scary.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of people in the combat space who did hype me up. So I will say the people that have been very welcoming to me as a woman are actually the fighters, the men, people you wouldn't expect, very supportive, very welcoming, like very willing to like lend a hand. And other men who have big combat pages have been very helpful to me. Yeah, and then a couple of girls who exist in the space already who work, like I have a friend who's a matchmaker at Combate Americas. She kind of like hyped me up, like, I know it's hard, but you have to do it because you're going to be successful, because nobody will do it. And I really thought about that. Like after she hyped me up, I thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? It is scary, and I don't always want to deal with that energy. But if I don't do it, is no one ever going to? And then, you know, like some girl younger than me with less experience who's going to try and have to deal with, but like somebody has to make it just a little bit of a softer environment, or there has to be a safe space somewhere. So that really kind of motivated me when I didn't feel like it anymore. I'm like, okay, there's two things. I know it's not going to flop because the engagement will be high, even if it's all hate. So if I can toughen up and learn how to handle that, I'm going to make it better for someone else, even if it's just one person, and then they can make it better for 2 more people. And then eventually there can be women in that space. Like there's a lot of very much the like incel culture for some reason attracted to that combat, you know, like very, I don't know how you would describe these men, but I'm sure you know the types who just want to say horrible things to women all the time. I don't know why they love combat sports so much, this type of man, but as much as they don't want women in the space, we want to be here. I love fight sports. I can't explain to you why, but I just do. It's my hobby. It's my passion. It's my hyperfixation. So, I mean, I can't be scared. It's just someone has to make it better. So we're trying, and we're trying to do it in a way where we can't come in guns blazing and be like, rah, rah, we're like super feminist and we're you men, it's just not going to work. I know the audience, so I'm trying to kind of softly integrate it. So I kind of took some of the things that they were throwing at me and thought, how can I own this and make it funny? And at the same time, when I was getting a lot of those bimbo make me sandwich comments, on TikTok trending was bimbo core, where girls were kind of empowering themselves with bimbo core. And I love that aesthetic. And I was like, it kind of inspired me, like, why don't I take these terms back, bimbo, make me a sandwich, and add this aesthetic that I really like that women are finding empowering on TikTok and make sports bimbo. So that was how I came up with the idea. So if you see the aesthetic, it's very pink. We wear bows, we wear schoolgirl skirts, and we talk about the most violent sports in the world.
What has business ownership, specifically in sports, taught you?
It's interesting. So it's taken me a year. I've been behind the scenes kind of pitching my concept to people, and I just got a deal. I just got a 1-year deal for my podcast, which is allowing me to even make it. Otherwise, I'd be shooting it on my phone. So yes, I have this startup now, but the startup element of it, I am bootstrapping, which I think is interesting, and I want to own it. I don't want to have shame about it. I am bootstrapping it with my money that I make from Playboy. So I'm taking pictures of my ass and I'm flipping it into a sports brand, which I think is actually really cool. I think there's people will try to shame me for it. I'm actually proud of myself that I was able to quit my job and not be a 50 hours a week slaving away and do that, which there is a sacrifice that comes in doing that. There's stigma and people will try to shame you and it's vulnerable, but it empowered me to have the freedom and flexibility that I have time to invest into Sports Bimbo, which I do believe will be $1 million company. I want it to be like a female bar stool. I'm going to roll out a new vertical every year for a different sport. Like there's a lot of prolific female sports fans. If you think of like Britt Baker and the Steelers and, so there's a lot of verticals that can be rolled out for women. I'm starting out with combat because that's my passion, but I hope to eventually find girls to spearhead and be the sports bimbo for NFL, wrestling, hockey, MLB, you name it. So it started with an idea and Playboy money, and now I have a deal 1 year later, and then we'll see where I go a year from now.
When you started planning everything, explain the apprehension or explain the nervousness, because you're leaving this position that you've been struggling at. You have experienced all of this stuff and you're going into entrepreneurship. Explain kind of those emotions that you had at any point where you kind of like, I don't know about this. How does that look now a year later?
I was terrified to leave my job, even though it was shillings, it was security, it was guaranteed money. Oh my God, it was the scariest feeling in the world to like take that leap. And I really believe in like manifestation and all that. And I did try to lean into all that. I even had friends like read me tarot cards, like, is it going to work out for me? And they were like, yes. And it was like gut wrenching to do it. But I just was so unfulfilled and so unhappy in my position, which should have been something I love. Like, what a dream to have a full-time job making content about a sport you love. That is technically a dream job. So, but it was miserable for me. And I knew that there was something better out there for me and that I could create something better after seeing what I had seen from them. Honestly, these people had millions of dollars in seed funding that they had raised, capital, also just from ideas and having work background. So I kind of was like, I can do that too. But it was very scary. I had to overcome a lot of, honestly, lack mindset from my past, like, what if it doesn't work out and I'm going to end up in the streets and, whatever. I can't explain to you like how I was able to, because there was nothing, I didn't have a huge savings. I didn't have anything guaranteeing me that it was going to work out. I just guess was a little like crazy and delusional. And then it worked out the first month and then the month after that. And sometimes things got bigger for me. Sometimes things got smaller, but I've been able to get by the whole time. And I'm so grateful for that every day. It's a year now. And that's a pretty big feat to like not have to clock in for anyone and, still be going okay and being able to build something else. Very, very scary. I don't have, like family support. Nobody is behind me. No man, no parents, nothing like that. full just risk and scraping by. But I recommend it.
No, I mean, the brand that you have grown, like I said, I've followed you for a while now, and it's just been so exciting to see your excitement with combat sports and especially your new company. I think that especially in combat sports, professional wrestling, like women who are making content are so few and far between, and especially with combat sports. You can probably count on one hand how many people are doing it. And it's so important, though, because you have those female fans who are watching. They want to see that representation when they go listen to a podcast or they go watch a video. They don't want to see men all the time.
Yeah, and I've touched on this in my podcast, but I think that the way that women view sports might be a little different.
Mm-hmm.
But it has to come from us, not a man saying bedazzle it.
Right.
I do think the way that I at least view combat sports is different. I do notice things that the men don't notice. I noticed that the men at the company, they loved the math of it all. They loved memorizing every statistic. You know, they know everyone's record. I'm not like that. That's not the information that I'm retaining. I'm retaining a lot of like visual things that maybe the men aren't retaining. And I had shame about that at first, but I'm leaning into that. And I'm like, that's okay. You know, I'm here for the fun and the jokes and the memes and the outfits and who won, who do you think is going to win. Sometimes I joke around and try to predict a fight using astrology. I don't have a man brain, and I think that's fun and okay. And I think everybody, not even about gender, but someone should make the content that they want to see because somebody else wants to see it. It can't all just be homogenous.
Super excited to keep up with you. Thank you, Stella, so much for joining me here on Wrestling Winedown. Where can the people keep up with you on social media?
At Stella Kae 444, that's my Instagram, and at Stella Kae on Twitter. I have link trees in all my bios. You can find my like Twitch, my Kick, all the things, my Playboy, or at Sports Bimbo on every social is at Sports Bimbo.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Wrestling Winedown. You can find all of our other episodes available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. We are on Twitter and Instagram at WWDCAST. We also have our official merch store, which you can find at shop.wrestlingwinedownlv.com. Let us know what you thought about this episode. What was your favorite part? Until next time, enjoy your wine and, of course, enjoy your wrestling. Cheers!